Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Lie. Staff Sergeant Marshall Wyatt crouched behind concrete barriers in the dusty outskirts of Kandahar, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool March evening. 3 tours in Afghanistan had hardened him into something most people back home wouldn't recognize. A calculating predator who'd learned that mercy was a luxury that got good men killed. His phone buzzed against his chest. A text from Jessica Clay, his fiancée of 2 years. His heart actually warmed seeing her name. One of the few emotions he still allowed himself to feel in this hellscape. Missing you so much, baby. Can't wait for the wedding next month. The baby is getting bigger every day. I love you both so much. Marshall smiled. One of his rare, genuine expressions. Jessica was 4 months pregnant with their first child, and the wedding was scheduled for his return. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, maybe, but Marshall had learned to accept the good when it came. 2 hours later, as he cleaned his rifle in the armory, another text came through. This one made his blood freeze. He fell for it. He thinks the baby is his. We'll take his house and his savings after the wedding. That fool will be paying child support for another man's kid. Marshall stared at the screen for a full minute, his mind processing what he'd just read. Then came the immediate follow-up. OMG, wrong person. Delete that. It was meant for MOM. Marshall, please ignore that text. My phone is glitching. Baby, please call me. Marshall's hands didn't shake. They never did anymore. Years of combat had burned that weakness out of him. But something cold and ancient settled in his chest, something that had kept him alive through hell and would serve him well now. He set the phone aside and finished cleaning his weapon with methodical precision. Jessica Clay had just made the worst mistake of her pathetic life. She'd awakened something that had been sleeping, something that enemies of America had learned to fear. But Marshall Wyatt was patient. He'd been hunting human predators for years, and he knew the most important rule: never strike when you're angry. Strike when you're ready. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. Marshall spent the next week conducting reconnaissance, just as he would on any mission. He made one call, not to Jessica, but to his old Army buddy Doug Emery, who now worked private security in Chicago. Doug, I need a favor. Deep background check. Everything you can find. Jessica Clay, age 26, lives in Millbrook Heights. Also Troy Warner, age 28, same area. Financial records, employment history, medical records if you can get them. And I need it fast. Jesus, Marshall, that's your girl, isn't it? What's going on? Just do it, Doug. And keep it quiet. Doug's voice turned serious. He'd served 2 tours with Marshall and knew that tone. You got it, brother. Give me 72 hours. Marshall maintained normal contact with Jessica during this time, responding to her increasingly frantic texts with short, reassuring messages. She was clearly panicked about the accidental text, trying to gauge if he believed her phone glitch story. Can't wait to see you and meet our baby, he texted back, each word calculated to keep her calm and unsuspecting. Meanwhile, Marshall used his military connections to request emergency leave. The false compassionate leave request was approved within hours. One advantage of being a decorated soldier with 3 tours and a spotless record. Doug's report arrived exactly 72 hours later, and it painted a picture that made Marshall's jaw clench. Jessica Clay had been in a relationship with Troy Warner for over 2 years, longer than she'd been with Marshall. Warner was a local real estate agent, married with 2 kids of his own, with a history of financial troubles and gambling debts. The most damaging piece: medical records showed Jessica had conceived during a period when Marshall was deployed, making it impossible for him to be the father. But there was more. Doug had dug deeper, uncovering a pattern. Jessica had been researching military benefits, survivor benefits, and divorce laws in their state. She'd even consulted with a divorce attorney 3 months ago, while telling Marshall how excited she was about their future together. Marshall sat in his bunk that night, staring at the evidence of Jessica's betrayal. Around him, other soldiers slept, some muttering in their dreams about firefights and IEDs. But Marshall was dreaming of something else entirely. He pulled out a notebook and began to write. Plans. Contingencies. A detailed operation that would destroy Jessica Clay and Troy Warner so completely that they'd beg for the mercy he had no intention of giving. The next morning, Marshall boarded a transport plane back to the States. As the aircraft lifted off, he looked out at the Afghan mountains one last time. He learned to hunt in those mountains. Now he was bringing those skills home. Chapter 3. Homecoming Preparations. Marshall landed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, after a grueling 18-hour journey. Instead of heading straight home to Illinois, he made a detour to visit his older brother, Preston Wyatt, who ran a small construction company in Nashville. Preston took one look at Marshall's face and poured 2 whiskeys without being asked. "You look like you're about to start a war, little brother." Something like that. Marshall laid out the entire situation, watching Preston's expression darken with each detail. Preston had always been protective of Marshall, especially after their parents died in a car accident when Marshall was 18. He'd been the one to encourage Marshall to join the Army, knowing his brother needed structure and purpose after their loss. "What do you need?" Preston asked without hesitation. "Equipment, surveillance gear, and I need you to buy a property for me. Cash transaction, your name on the deed. Rural area, isolated. Big enough for privacy." Preston nodded grimly. "I know just a place. Old farmhouse about an hour outside Nashville. Owner died last year. Family wants to sell quick." "What else?" Marshall pulled out a detailed list he'd written on the plane. "Untraceable phones, vehicle with clean plates, and I need you to spread word through your contractor network. You're looking for 2 people for a big job. High pay, out of state, requires relocating for 6 months. You're going to make them disappear." It wasn't a question. Preston knew his brother well enough to recognize when Marshall had moved beyond anger into something far more dangerous. "They destroyed my life before I even knew there was a war," Marshall said quietly. "They made me love a lie, made me dream about a future that never existed. They turned me into a fool." "You're not a fool, Marshall. You're just not a sociopath like them." "I am now." Preston studied his brother's face. The same features they'd shared since childhood, but something behind the eyes had changed. The Marshall who'd left for Afghanistan still had traces of the boy Preston remembered. This Marshall was something else entirely. "All right," Preston said finally. "But we do this smart. No half measures, no loose ends. If we're going to war, we're going to win." They spent the next 2 days planning. Preston purchased the farmhouse, a 40-acre property with a main house, several outbuildings, and complete isolation. He also acquired the requested equipment through various channels, including some items that weren't exactly legal for civilian use. Marshall, meanwhile, began the delicate process of psychological manipulation. He called Jessica, telling her he'd managed to get emergency leave and would be home in 3 days for a surprise visit before shipping out again. Jessica's relief was audible through the phone. "Oh, thank God, baby. I was so worried about that stupid text. I was going to explain everything when you got home." "Explain what?" Marshall asked innocently. "Nothing. I mean the phone thing. It was just, you know how technology is." "I do know," Marshall said, and there was something in his voice that made Jessica pause. "Marshall, are you okay? You sound different. Just tired, sweetheart. Combat changes a man. But don't worry. I'm still the same Marshall you fell in love with." After he hung up, Marshall stared at the phone for a long moment. In a way, he was telling the truth. He was still the same man she'd fallen in love with. The problem was Jessica Clay had never really known who that man was. She was about to find out. Chapter 4. The Wedding March. Marshall arrived home on a Thursday afternoon, exactly as he'd promised. He drove a rental car to the modest house he'd purchased for Jessica 2 years ago, the house she was planning to steal from him after their wedding. Jessica was waiting on the porch, radiant in a yellow sundress that accentuated her pregnancy. For a moment, seeing her there, Marshall felt an echo of the love he'd once carried. Then he remembered the text, and that echo died. "Welcome home, soldier," she said, rushing into his arms. Marshall held her, noting how she trembled slightly. Fear or excitement? Probably both. He kissed her gently, tasting the lies on her lips. "How's our baby?" he asked, placing his hand on her belly. Jessica's smile faltered for just an instant, growing strong. The doctor says everything's perfect. I can't wait to meet him. Just a feeling. Marshall smiled. A father knows these things. That evening, Jessica's mother, Barbara Rogers, joined them for dinner. Barbara was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd never quite approved of Marshall, though she'd hidden it well. Now, with her daughter's windfall approaching, she was almost giddy. "So Marshall, dear," Barbara said over dessert, "Jessica tells me you're thinking of buying a bigger house after the wedding. Somewhere with more room for the baby." "Actually, I've been reconsidering that," Marshall said carefully. "Military pay doesn't go as far as it used to. We might need to scale back our plans." He watched both women tense. Jessica recovered first. "But sweetheart, we've already made so many plans. The nursery, the wedding, everything." "Plans change," Marshall said mildly. "In Afghanistan, you learn to adapt to circumstances beyond your control." Barbara's fork clinked against her plate. "Surely you're not suggesting canceling the wedding?" "Of course not. But maybe something smaller, more intimate, just close family." Marshall could see the panic building in Jessica's eyes. A smaller wedding meant fewer witnesses, less legitimacy, potentially complicating their legal claim to his assets. "Marshall," Jessica said carefully, "is this about that text? Because I swear to you—" "What text?" Barbara interrupted too quickly. Jessica shot her mother a warning look, but Marshall caught it. Another piece of evidence for his growing case file. "Jessica's phone malfunctioned while I was overseas," Marshall explained to Barbara. "Sent some gibberish to me instead of you. Technology, right?" Barbara relaxed visibly. "Oh yes, these phones today. So complicated." After dinner, Marshall and Jessica sat on their porch swing, her head on his shoulder as they watched the sun set. It was peaceful, domestic, everything Marshall had dreamed of during his deployment. "I love you," Jessica whispered. "I know things have been stressful with the deployment and the wedding planning, but I love you so much." "I love you too," Marshall replied, and part of him meant it. He loved the woman he'd thought she was. But that woman had never existed. "Marshall, there's something I need to tell you." Jessica's voice was soft, uncertain. Marshall's muscles tensed. Was she going to confess? "What is it, sweetheart?" I've been seeing a therapist. About anxiety. The pregnancy, your deployment, everything has been so overwhelming." Another lie. Marshall had seen her therapy bills in Doug's report, sessions that started long before her pregnancy. Around the same time, she'd begun planning her deception. "That's good," he said. "Taking care of your mental health is important. For you and the baby." Jessica relaxed against him. "I was worried you'd think I was weak." "I could never think that." Marshall stroked her hair gently. "You're the strongest woman I know." As they sat in the gathering darkness, Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from Preston. "Package delivered to the farm. Everything's ready when you are." Marshall deleted the message and squeezed Jessica closer. "You know what?" he said. "You're right about the wedding. Let's do it exactly as planned. Big celebration, all our friends and family. I want everyone to see how happy we are." Jessica's relief was palpable. "Really? Oh, Marshall, I'm so glad. It's going to be perfect." "Yes," Marshall agreed, staring into the darkness beyond their porch. "It's going to be perfect." Chapter 5. The Dance of Deception. The next morning, Marshall suggested they meet with Troy Warner to discuss wedding venues. "I heard he has connections in the real estate business," Marshall said casually. "Maybe he knows some good locations." Jessica's face went pale. "Troy Warner? I don't really know him that well." "Really? That's strange. Doug Emery mentioned seeing you two together several times when he was in town last month." Marshall watched Jessica's mind race, trying to calculate how much he might know. "Oh yes, we've met a few times. Real estate stuff, you know, for the house." "Of course. Well, since we're looking at venues anyway, why not get his professional opinion?" Jessica had no choice but to agree. An hour later, they sat in Troy Warner's office, a sleek space in Millbrook Heights business district. Troy was a handsome man in his late 20s, with the easy charm of a successful salesman. When he saw Marshall, his confidence visibly wavered. "Mr. Wyatt," Troy said, extending his hand. "Jessica's told me so much about you. Thank you for your service." Marshall shook his hand, applying just enough pressure to make Troy wince. She's told me about you, too. All good things. They discussed venue options for 20 minutes, Troy gradually relaxing as the conversation remained professional. Marshall played the role of eager groom perfectly, asking about capacity, catering options, photography setups. There's one place that might be perfect, Troy said, warming to his subject. The old Hartfield estate, about an hour outside town. It's been on the market for months, and the owner might be willing to rent it for events. Beautiful grounds, complete privacy. Privacy sounds perfect, Marshall said. Mind if we take a look? Troy glanced at Jessica, who nodded reluctantly. Sure, I could show you this afternoon. An hour later, they were driving through rolling countryside toward the Hartfield estate. Marshall rode in Troy's BMW, while Jessica followed in her car, claiming she needed to run errands afterward. The estate was impressive, a Victorian mansion on 50 acres, surrounded by woods and completely isolated. Troy led them through the main house, pointing out features that would work well for a wedding reception. The ballroom can hold 200 guests, Troy explained, leading them into a grand space with crystal chandeliers. And the grounds are perfect for an outdoor ceremony. Marshall nodded appreciatively while mentally cataloging the property's isolation, the multiple buildings, the various ways someone could disappear here without a trace. This is perfect, he told Troy. But I have to ask, how do you know so much about this place? You seem very familiar with it. Troy's smile flickered. I've shown it to several clients. It's been hard to sell because of the location. Remote properties can be challenging, Marshall agreed. But sometimes isolation is exactly what you need. Something in Marshall's tone made Troy look at him more carefully. Mr. Wyatt, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do in the Army? Special Forces, reconnaissance, and elimination. Elimination of targets. Marshall's smile was cold. I'm very good at finding people who don't want to be found and dealing with them permanently. Troy's face had gone pale. I see. The thing about hunting, Marshall continued conversationally, is that patience is everything. You have to study your prey, understand their habits, their weaknesses. You have to know them better than they know themselves. That's interesting. For instance, Marshall said, moving closer to Troy, a smart hunter always knows when he's being lied to. Animals lie through their behavior. False confidence, misdirection, panic masquerading as calm. Humans lie the same way. Troy was sweating now, despite the cool air in the mansion. I'm not sure I follow. I think you do. Marshall's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I think you follow perfectly. Before Troy could respond, Jessica appeared in the doorway. How's the tour going? Wonderfully, Marshall said, not taking his eyes off Troy. I was just telling Troy about my work in Afghanistan, how I hunted down enemies who thought they were safe. Jessica's voice was strained. That's nice, honey. Are we almost done here? Almost. Marshall finally looked away from Troy, whose relief was visible. Troy, would you mind giving us a moment alone? I'd like to discuss this with my fiancée privately. Troy nodded quickly and stepped outside. As soon as he was gone, Jessica grabbed Marshall's arm. What was that about? You were scaring him. Was I? I was just being friendly. Marshall studied Jessica's face. You seem nervous too. Is there something I should know about Troy? No, I barely know him. You seemed intense. Combat changes a man, Marshall said again. Sometimes I forget how to turn it off. Jessica relaxed slightly. Maybe we should go. This place gives me the creeps anyway. Actually, I love it. Let's book it for the wedding. Marshall, I don't think. I insist. His voice carried a finality that made Jessica step back. This place is perfect for what I have in mind. Chapter 6, The Art of War. That evening, Marshall sat in his rental car outside Troy Warner's house, a modest suburban home where Troy lived with his wife Dolores and their 2 children. Through the lit windows, Marshall watched Troy attempt to maintain normalcy while clearly shaken from their afternoon encounter. Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Miller's Diner, Route 9. Come alone. T. Marshall smiled. Troy was panicking, just as planned. Fear made people stupid, and stupid people made mistakes. Miller's Diner was a 24-hour truck stop on the outskirts of town. Marshall arrived to find Troy already there, hunched over coffee in a corner booth, looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "You came," Troy said as Marshall slid into the opposite seat. "You asked nicely." Marshall signaled the waitress for coffee. "What's on your mind, Troy?" "Look, I know what you think you know, but I don't think anything. I know everything." Marshall's voice was calm, conversational. "I know you've been sleeping with my fiancée for 2 years. I know that's your baby she's carrying. I know about the plan to take my house, my savings, everything I've worked for." Troy's face crumpled. "Ow, because I'm very good at my job. And my job, Troy, is killing people who lie to me. Jesus Christ. He's not going to help you." Marshall leaned forward. "But I might, if you're smart." Troy's eyes flicked up. "What do you want?" "I want Jessica, but not the way you think." Marshall sipped his coffee calmly. "I want her to suffer the way she made me suffer. I want her to feel what it's like to have everything she loves destroyed. I'm not going to help you hurt her. No, let me tell you what's going to happen if you don't." Marshall's voice remained perfectly level. "I'm going to destroy your marriage first. Photos of you and Jessica in bed, sent to your wife. Evidence of the baby, the affair, everything. Your wife will take your kids and half your assets." Troy was shaking now. "You bastard. Then I'm going to destroy your business. A few words to the right people about your flexibility with property disclosures, your gambling debts, your financial irregularities. Real estate is built on trust, Troy. Once that's gone, you're finished. You can't." Then, Marshall continued as if Troy hadn't spoken. "I'm going to destroy you personally. You see, I've learned some interesting things about you, Troy. That gambling problem? You owe money to some very unpleasant people. People who would be very interested to know about your little inheritance plan." Troy's face was white. "Oh, what do you know about?" "I know everything, Troy. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marshall reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Option 1, you disappear. Tonight. Leave town. Leave Jessica. Start over somewhere far away. There's a cashier's check in there for $50,000. More than enough to get lost permanently." Troy stared at the envelope. "And if I don't?" "Option 2, you help me give Jessica exactly what she deserves. You play along with her plan, but with some modifications of my own. When it's over, you walk away with your life and your family intact." "What kind of modifications?" Marshall's smile was terrifying. "The kind that will make her beg for the mercy I'm not going to give her." Troy was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. Finally, he looked up. "What do you need me to do?" "First, you're going to convince Jessica to move the wedding to the Hartfield estate. Tell her it's perfect for the plan. Isolated, private, plenty of ways to make me disappear after she gets what she wants." Troy flinched. "Make you disappear?" "Oh yes, Troy. Jessica's plan is more ambitious than you know. She's not planning to divorce me and take half. She's planning to become a grieving military widow with full benefits. A terrible accident on our honeymoon, perhaps. Or maybe a PTSD episode gone wrong." The color drained from Troy's face. "She wouldn't." "Check your phone." Troy pulled out his phone with trembling hands. Marshall had sent him a series of text screenshots, conversations between Jessica and her mother about permanent solutions and widow's benefits. "Jesus," Troy whispered. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know she was planning." "Now you do." Marshall leaned back. "Still think she loves you, Troy? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're just as expendable as I am. How long before she decides you know too much?" Troy was quiet for several minutes, processing this new information. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "What do you want me to do?" Marshall smiled. "I want you to be the perfect boyfriend, Troy. Support her plan, encourage her ambitions. And when the time comes, I want you to help me give her exactly what she's trying to give me. I won't be part of murder." "Murder?" Marshall looked genuinely surprised. "Who said anything about murder?" "Troy, I'm not going to kill Jessica Clay. I'm going to do something much worse." "What?" "I'm going to let her live with the consequences of her choices." Marshall stood, throwing a 20 on the table. "You have 48 hours to decide, Troy. Choose wisely. Because unlike Jessica, I'm not planning to let you live with your mistakes." Chapter 7. The Perfect Wedding. 2 weeks later, the Hartfield estate buzzed with wedding preparations. Jessica had embraced the venue change with enthusiasm, seeing the isolation as perfect for the final phase of her plan. She'd even suggested making it a weekend-long celebration, with guests staying in the estate's guest quarters. Marshall stood in the mansion's library, adjusting his dress uniform in an antique mirror. Through the window, he could see guests arriving, family, friends, fellow soldiers on leave. People who genuinely cared about him and Jessica, who had no idea they were about to witness something that would haunt them forever. Preston entered, also in dress uniform. As Marshall's best man, he'd been privy to every detail of the plan. "Everything's in position," he said quietly. "Doug's team has the perimeter covered. No one's leaving early. The recording equipment, every room, every conversation, audio and video." Preston checked his watch. Jessica's been busy this morning. 3 calls to her mother, 2 to her lawyer, 1 to a number we can't trace. "Life insurance company," Marshall said without looking away from the mirror. "Making sure all the paperwork is in order for her grieving widow act." "You sure about this, brother? Once it starts, there's no going back." Marshall turned from the mirror. The man looking back at him was someone Preston barely recognized. Cold, calculating, utterly without mercy. "I've been sure since the moment I read that text." Downstairs, the ceremony was beginning. Marshall took his position at the altar, looking out at the assembled guests. Jessica's family sat on one side, his on the other. Doug Emery and several other military friends were scattered throughout the crowd. Insurance, in case things went sideways. The music began, and Jessica appeared at the back of the aisle. She was radiant in white silk, her pregnancy barely showing, every inch the blushing bride. As she walked toward him, Marshall felt that familiar echo of love and crushed it ruthlessly. Troy Warner sat in the third row, his wife Dolores beside him, their children playing quietly in the aisle. Troy looked sick, barely holding himself together as he watched the woman he'd betrayed march toward her doom. The ceremony proceeded normally for the first 20 minutes. Marshall spoke his vows with apparent sincerity, watching Jessica glow with triumph as she recited hers. She was minutes away from becoming his legal wife, from gaining access to everything she'd plotted to steal. Then, as the minister reached the critical moment, Marshall raised his hand. "Wait," he said quietly. "Before we continue, there's something I need to share with everyone here." The minister looked confused. "Mr. Wyatt, this is highly irregular. I need to tell you all about the real Jessica Clay." Marshall's voice carried clearly through the hushed room. "The woman I fell in love with. The woman who doesn't exist." Jessica's face went white. "Marshall, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth, sweetheart. Something you've forgotten how to do." Marshall reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. With the press of a button, speakers throughout the estate crackled to life, playing the original text message in Jessica's own voice, enhanced and clarified. "He fell for it. He thinks the baby is his. We'll take his house and his savings after the wedding. That fool will be paying child support for another man's kid." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Gasps from the crowd, Jessica's family looking stricken, Marshall's friends rising from their seats in anger. Barbara Rogers tried to stand, but found herself gently but firmly restrained by Doug Emery. "That's not," Jessica started, but Marshall pressed the button again. This time, it was a recording of her conversation with her mother from that morning, discussing the accident they were planning for Marshall during the honeymoon. "You see," Marshall said conversationally, as chaos erupted around them, "I've spent the last month learning everything about the woman I was about to marry. Would you like to hear more?" "Marshall, please," Jessica was crying now, her perfect facade crumbling. "Did you know," Marshall continued, "that Jessica has been researching military widow benefits for 6 months? Or that she's been consulting with lawyers about how to claim my life insurance? Or that the baby she's carrying belongs to Troy Warner, who's sitting right over there with his real family?" Every eye in the room turned to Troy, who had gone pale as death. His wife Dolores stared at him in growing horror as the implication sank in. "Stop," Jessica whispered. "Please stop." "Why?" Marshall asked gently. "We're just getting to the good part." Chapter 8, The Reckoning. The estate's ballroom had been transformed from a wedding reception venue into something resembling a courtroom. Marshall's military friends had quietly positioned themselves at every exit, while Preston coordinated with local law enforcement who were stationed outside. Marshall stood at the center of the room, still in his dress uniform, facing Jessica, who sat in a chair like a defendant awaiting judgment. The wedding guests had been separated into groups, Jessica's co-conspirators on one side, innocent bystanders on the other. Let's start with the timeline, Marshall said, consulting a tablet. 18 months ago, while I was deployed in Afghanistan, Jessica began her relationship with Troy Warner. Medical records show she conceived during this period, making it impossible for me to be the father. Dr. Sarah Kramer, Jessica's obstetrician, looked stricken from the crowd. Jessica, you told me your fiancé was the father. I based all my recommendations on that information. 15 months ago, Marshall continued, Jessica began researching military benefits, specifically those available to widows of combat veterans. She also contacted 3 different law firms about property law and inheritance rights. Jessica's family lawyer, Rick Leonard, stood up from the crowd. Jessica, what is this? You told me you needed advice about protecting your assets in case of your husband's deployment injury. 12 months ago, Jessica purchased a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, listing herself as the sole beneficiary. She forged my signature on the application. Murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. Insurance fraud was a felony, and everyone knew it. 6 months ago, Jessica began planning my death. Marshall's voice remained calm, professional. Not just divorce, not just theft. Murder, carefully disguised as an accident during our honeymoon. Barbara Rogers finally found her voice. This is insane. Marshall, you're having some kind of breakdown. Am I? Marshall pressed another button on his device. Barbara's voice filled the room, crystal clear. The lake house would be perfect. Remote, no witnesses. Make it look like he went swimming and drowned. Happens to veterans all the time. PTSD, depression, they just give up. Barbara's face went ashen as her own words condemned her. 3 weeks ago, Marshall continued, Jessica contacted a private investigator, asking for someone who could arrange an accident for her husband. Unfortunately for her, that investigator was Doug Emery, my former squad leader. Doug stepped forward from the crowd. Jessica offered me $50,000 to kill her husband. She provided detailed plans, including how to make it look like suicide. I recorded everything. The room erupted in horrified whispers. Several guests looked physically ill. Troy Warner was staring at Jessica as if seeing her for the first time. You didn't know about that part, did you, Troy? Marshall asked gently. About the murder plan? You thought she just wanted to steal my money and leave me alive to pay child support. Troy shook his head mutely, his face a mask of revulsion. The beautiful thing about being a predator, Marshall said, is that you eventually reveal your true nature. Jessica couldn't help herself. She kept escalating, kept planning worse and worse betrayals, until she crossed lines that even her co-conspirators found unacceptable. Marshall walked over to Jessica, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think a man trained to hunt terrorists wouldn't notice when he was being hunted himself? I never meant, Jessica started. You never meant to get caught, Marshall corrected. But you meant everything else. Every lie, every deception, every plan to destroy me. He turned to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I've called you here today not just to witness this revelation, but to serve as a jury. Because Jessica Clay has committed crimes against all of us. She's made fools of my family, liars of her own, and potential accessories to murder of anyone who helped her. Marshall's voice hardened, but I'm not going to let the justice system handle this. They're too gentle, too forgiving. Jessica needs to understand what she's really done. What are you going to do? Jessica whispered. Marshall smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression anyone in the room had ever seen. I'm going to give you exactly what you gave me, Jessica. I'm going to destroy your entire life while leaving you alive to suffer through the consequences. Chapter 9. Justice Served Cold. 6 months later, Marshall Wyatt sat in a small cafe in downtown Nashville, reading a newspaper article about the final chapter of what the media had dubbed the Wedding Day Exposé. The headline read, Former real estate agent sentenced to 10 years for insurance fraud conspiracy. Troy Warner had pled guilty to conspiracy charges, admitting his role in the plot to defraud Marshall's insurance companies. His wife Dolores had divorced him within a week of the wedding day revelations, taking their children and half his assets. His real estate license had been revoked, and he was now serving his sentence in federal prison. But Troy had gotten off easy compared to Jessica. Marshall turned the page to find another article. Mother-daughter conspiracy ring exposed in military benefits fraud. Barbara Rogers had been sentenced to 15 years for her role in organizing the murder plot. Her other assets had been seized under federal racketeering laws. Jessica Clay, who had reverted to her maiden name after their marriage, was declared invalid due to fraud, was serving a 25-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, identity theft, and a dozen other charges. The baby, born in prison, had been placed for adoption. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of Marshall's revenge. Preston Wyatt entered the cafe and slid into the opposite booth. "The last transfer went through this morning," he reported. "The house, the cars, everything in Jessica's name has been liquidated and donated to military widows assistance programs." Marshall nodded with satisfaction. Every asset Jessica had tried to steal had been legally claimed as evidence, then donated to help real military widows, the very people Jessica had tried to defraud. "What about the estate?" Marshall asked. "Purchased and converted into a veterans retreat center. Doug's running it now, helping soldiers transition back to civilian life." Preston smiled grimly. "We named it the Jessica Clay Memorial Center for Honesty and Integrity." Marshall actually laughed at that, the first genuine laugh Preston had heard from his brother since the deployment. "And the insurance companies? Pursuing civil suits against everyone involved. Even if Jessica ever gets out of prison, she'll spend the rest of her life paying restitution." Preston paused. "Marshall, there's something else. Troy Warner tried to contact you from prison. He wants to apologize." Marshall's expression hardened. "No forgiveness. No second chances. He made his choice. I figured. Just thought you should know." Preston studied his brother's face. "You feel better? Getting all this justice?" Marshall considered the question. Did he feel better? The hollow ache of betrayal was gone, replaced by a cold satisfaction. Jessica Clay had learned what happened when someone tried to prey on Marshall Wyatt. The lesson had cost her everything: her freedom, her child, her future, her hope. "I feel balanced," Marshall said finally. "The scales are even now." A young waitress approached their table, nervous about interrupting. "Excuse me, are you Marshall Wyatt, the soldier from the news?" Marshall tensed, but the woman's expression was one of admiration, not judgment. "I just wanted to thank you," she continued. "My husband was killed in Iraq 3 years ago, and I've been struggling with his benefits. The foundation you set up, the one funded by, well, it saved my life. My kids and I will have lost our house without that help." Marshall looked up at her, seeing genuine gratitude in her eyes. "What's your name?" "Christy Rollins. My husband was Sergeant Michael Rollins, 82nd Airborne." "I knew Mike," Marshall said quietly. "He was a good soldier, a good man." Tears filled Christy's eyes. "He always said the worst thing about serving wasn't the danger. It was worrying that if something happened to him, we'd be forgotten. But because of what you did, because you caught those people trying to steal benefits meant for families like mine, we're not forgotten." After she left, Preston looked at his brother with new understanding. "That's why you did all this. Not just for revenge. Justice," Marshall corrected. "Revenge is personal. Justice serves a larger purpose." Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from Doug Emery. "New group of vets arriving at the center tomorrow. 3 combat veterans, all struggling with reintegration. Thanks to your funding, we can help them rebuild their lives." Marshall smiled and replied, "Keep up the good work. Let me know if you need anything." As they left the cafe, Preston asked, "What's next for you?" "Back to active duty." Marshall shook his head. "I'm transitioning out. Go to work with Doug at the center." Turns out hunting predators translates, well, to hunting the demons that chase veterans home from war. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, 2 brothers who had weathered the storm together. Preston said finally, "For what it's worth, I think Jessica Clay got exactly what she deserved. Marshall stopped walking and looked back toward the federal courthouse visible in the distance, where Jessica was serving her sentence. She got exactly what she gave me, Preston. She destroyed everything I believed in, so I destroyed everything she valued. She tried to steal my future, so I erased hers. She wanted to make me suffer for the rest of my life, so I made sure she would suffer for the rest of hers. And you don't feel bad about any of it? Marshall's expression was stone. I feel like a soldier who completed his mission. Nothing more, nothing less. As they drove away, Marshall thought about the last conversation he'd had with Jessica through the prison glass partition. She'd been a broken woman by then. All her schemes collapsed. All her dreams turned to ash. "I'm sorry," she'd whispered through the phone. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry." Marshall had looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had once made him believe in love and hope and a future worth fighting for. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust, Jessica. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent believing your lies. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you tried to have me murdered. I know. I need you to know I never meant for it to go that far. Yes, you did. Every choice you made led to that moment. Every lie, every deception, every betrayal. You built this prison cell with your own hands. Jessica had started crying then, but Marshall felt nothing. The woman he'd loved had never existed. The woman sitting across from him was a stranger who had stolen her face. "Will you ever forgive me?" she'd asked. Marshall had stood to leave. "Jessica, I'm going to give you one last gift, the truth. I will never forgive you. I will never forget what you tried to do to me. And every day, for the rest of your life, you're going to remember that you had a man who would have died for you, and you chose to destroy him instead. That had been 6 months ago." Jessica would spend the next 24 and a half years thinking about that conversation, just as Marshall had spent his last night in Afghanistan thinking about her betrayal. The scales were balanced. Justice was served, and Marshall Wyatt was finally free. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. To our amazing viewers at Infidelity Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Severed Ties. A steady autumn rain beat against the windows of Pike County Courthouse as Harlan Mercer waited for Judge Laurel Weinstein to sign the final divorce papers. At 42, Harlan sat straight-backed in his tailored charcoal suit, a physical embodiment of the self-control that had made him one of Pennsylvania's most formidable criminal defense attorneys. His calloused hands, remnants of his working-class upbringing, rested on the polished table, betraying nothing of the storm churning inside him. Across the room, Bethany Mercer, soon to revert to Bethany Lafferty, sat beside her boyfriend, Ryan Steiger. The sight of Ryan's hand resting possessively on Bethany's thigh made Harlan's jaw clench imperceptibly. Only 6 months ago, Ryan had been a client Harlan had successfully defended against aggravated assault charges. The man's gratitude had apparently extended to seducing Harlan's wife of 15 years. The terms are straightforward. Harlan's attorney, Marlene Wu, summarized. Mr. Mercer will maintain primary residence, and Ms. Lafferty receives the vacation property. Joint custody of Theo with alternating weekends and holidays. Child support as calculated by standard guidelines. Judge Weinstein nodded, reviewing the documents. Relatively amicable as these things go. I appreciate that. Harlan's eyes flicked toward Bethany. Amicable wasn't the word he'd choose. Calculated was more accurate. He'd learned long ago that revenge was best served cold, methodical, and within the bounds of legal procedure, at least initially. One final matter, Judge Weinstein said. Theo's birthday falls this Saturday. As per the agreement, Ms. Lafferty will host the celebration, but Mr. Mercer is entitled to attend for 2 hours. Ryan leaned forward, jaw tight. Your Honor, given the circumstances, the agreement stands, Judge Weinstein interrupted firmly. 2 hours, Mr. Mercer. I trust everyone will behave appropriately for the child's sake. Outside the courthouse, Marlene touched Harlan's arm. You okay? Fine, Harlan replied, watching Bethany and Ryan hurry to their car. Still don't understand why you didn't fight for the full value of the practice. She gets half despite the fact that you built it while she was. It's not about the money, Harlan cut her off. Marlene studied him. You've got that look. What look? The one you get before you demolish a prosecution's case. Harlan allowed himself a small smile. I need to prepare for Theo's birthday. As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed. A text from Pascal Bennett, his former military buddy who now ran a private intelligence firm. Information secured. Meeting tonight? Harlan typed back, confirmed. 9 p.m. The rain intensified as he drove away, his mind already mapping out the next moves in a game Bethany and Ryan didn't yet realize they were playing. Chapter 2. Hidden Cards. The Bennett security offices occupied the top floor of a converted factory building in downtown Milford. Pascal Bennett greeted Harlan with a firm handshake, his prosthetic right hand cold against Harlan's palm, a souvenir from their final deployment together in Afghanistan. Coffee, Pascal offered, leading Harlan past rows of monitors where analysts worked quietly. Thanks. Harlan settled into a chair in Pascal's office. What did you find? Pascal slid a tablet across the desk. Ryan Steiger is a careful man, but not careful enough. 3 years ago, he was working security for Westridge Pharmaceuticals. During that time, he developed a side arrangement with Del Mar cartel affiliates, helping them access proprietary formulas. Harlan raised an eyebrow. That wasn't in his criminal record. Because he was never caught, Pascal replied. The company suspected something but couldn't prove it. They fired him quietly to avoid scandal. That's when he moved to Pike County and eventually became your client. And Bethany? Pascal's expression tightened. She's been planning this for over a year. Found text messages between them dating back 14 months. She's been feeding him information about your cases, your schedule, even your security system. Harlan nodded, his face betraying nothing. The trust fund, untouched, as you suspected. $2.3 million sitting in an offshore account under her maiden name. She never disclosed it during the divorce proceedings. And Theodora Lafferty? Pascal tapped the screen, bringing up a photograph of an elderly woman. Bethany's great aunt. Terminal cancer, 6 months tops, according to her medical records. Bethany is her only living relative and sole beneficiary. Estate valued around $4.7 million. Harlan processed this information silently, pieces clicking into place. There's more, Pascal said carefully. Your son's medical records. Harlan's expression hardened. Show me. Pascal pulled up documents on a tablet. Theo's allergies. The medical forms Bethany submitted to the school last month removed your son's peanut allergy from his official records. For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Harlan's face. Raw, unfiltered rage that vanished almost immediately behind his professional mask. One wrong snack could put him in anaphylactic shock, Harlan said quietly. I've already contacted the school nurse anonymously. The records have been corrected, Pascal assured him. Harlan stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I need one more thing. Judge Sylvia Monroe. Pascal frowned. Family court? She's incorruptible, Harlan. I don't need corruption. I need her schedule for Saturday afternoon. Understanding dawned on Pascal's face. The birthday party. Can you give me a direct line to her chambers? Pascal nodded slowly. Consider it done. As Harlan turned to leave, Pascal called after him. Harlan, whatever you're planning. Don't worry, Harlan replied without turning around. Everything will be perfectly legal. That's not what concerns me. Harlan paused at the door. What does? I've seen that look before. In Kandahar. Before you walked into that compound alone. Harlan's lips curved in a cold smile. Then you know what happened to the men who underestimated me. Chapter 3. The Birthday Blockade. Saturday arrived with picture-perfect blue skies, as if the universe were mocking the darkness of Harlan's purpose. He parked his Mercedes a block from the sprawling Tudor home he had once shared with Bethany, the house where he'd carried her across the threshold, where they brought Theo home from the hospital, where he'd found them together 4 months ago. Harlan checked his watch. 2 p.m. exactly, the time stipulated in the court order. In one hand, he carried a carefully wrapped package. In the other, his phone with Judge Monroe's direct number programmed and ready. Children's laughter echoed from the backyard as Harlan approached the front door. He rang the bell, straightened his tie, and waited. The door swung open to reveal Bethany in a floral sundress, her smile evaporating at the sight of him. Behind her stood Ryan, arms crossed over his chest like a bouncer. "What are you doing here?" Bethany demanded. Harlan's voice remained steady. "I'm here for Theo's birthday, as permitted by court order." Ryan stepped forward. "The party's already started. Theo doesn't need you ruining it." 2 hours, Harlan replied. Judge Weinstein was quite specific. Bethany's sister Liv appeared in the hallway behind them. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," Harlan said calmly. "I'm simply exercising my legal right to attend my son's birthday celebration." Ryan positioned himself in the doorway, physically blocking entry. "Listen, you pathetic deadbeat, get lost. Nobody wants you here." Bethany stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You think anyone in there respects you? After what happened? After I left you? You're nothing but a joke to them." Harlan's expression remained impassive. "The court order, Bethany." Ryan placed a hand on Harlan's chest. "Court order doesn't mean shit here. Try to push past me. See what happens." From the corner of his eye, Harlan noticed 2 security guards, friends of Ryan's from his bouncer days, approaching from the side of the house. "Mr. Mercer," one called out. "Time to leave." He placed a firm hand on Harlan's shoulder. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Harlan could feel the weight of the guard's hand, see the smug triumph in Ryan's eyes, the contempt in Bethany's. Then Harlan did something that visibly unsettled them all. He smiled. Without a word, he placed Theo's gift on the doorstep, turned, and walked calmly back to his car. Once inside, he dialed the number and waited. "Judge Monroe," came the crisp answer. "Your Honor, this is Harlan Mercer. I apologize for disturbing your weekend, but there's an urgent matter regarding a child welfare concern and violation of court orders that requires immediate attention." 10 minutes later, he watched from his car as Bethany's phone rang. The transformation on her face was visible even from a distance, shock followed by fear. She handed the phone to Ryan, whose expression darkened as he listened. Moments later, Liv came rushing out of the house, face pale, as she hurried toward Harlan's car. "What the hell did you just do?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "The judge called and immediately wants to see us. All of us. Today." Harlan stepped out of his car, adjusting his cuffs. "I simply reported a violation of a court order and potential child endangerment." "Child endangerment? Are you insane? Removing Theo's peanut allergy from his medical records?" Harlan's voice was deadly quiet. "What would you call it?" The color drained from Liv's face. "Bethany wouldn't. Tell her and Ryan to bring Theo to Judge Monroe's chambers in 1 hour. I'll meet you there." Harlan opened his car door. "And Liv, this is just the beginning." Chapter 4. Chambers of Truth. Judge Sylvia Monroe's chambers felt unnaturally quiet for a Saturday afternoon. The typical courthouse bustle was absent, leaving only the soft ticking of an antique wall clock and the occasional rustle of papers as the judge reviewed the documents before her. Harlan sat perfectly still, a statue of patience. Across the room, Bethany repeatedly checked her phone while Ryan fidgeted with his watch. Theo sat between them, playing a game on a tablet, headphones isolating him from the tension saturating the room. Judge Monroe finally looked up, her steel-gray eyes moving deliberately between the parties. At 67, her reputation for no-nonsense justice was legendary in the county. "I've reviewed the evidence Mr. Mercer has provided," she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. "Falsification of medical records, violation of custody orders, and what appears to be a pattern of parental alienation." Bethany straightened. "Your Honor, those accusations are documented." Judge Monroe interrupted, holding up a folder. "School records showing the removal of a life-threatening allergy. Text messages between you and Mr. Steiger discussing ways to prevent Mr. Mercer from seeing his son." Testimony from the security personnel Mr. Steiger hired, stating they were instructed to remove Mr. Mercer by any means necessary if he attempted to attend the birthday celebration. Ryan leaned forward. "Judge, I can explain." "Mr. Steiger, you have no legal standing in this matter," Judge Monroe stated flatly. "Your presence here is purely as an observer." The judge turned to Theo, her expression softening. "Young man, would you mind stepping outside with my assistant for a few minutes? She has some books you might enjoy." After Theo left, Judge Monroe's demeanor hardened again. "Ms. Lafferty, these actions constitute contempt of court at minimum. At worst, they could be grounds for modification of the custody arrangement." Bethany paled. "You can't." "I absolutely can," Judge Monroe cut in. "And given the documented risk to the child's health, I'm inclined to issue an emergency modification today." "Your Honor," Harlan interjected smoothly, "if I may offer an alternative." All eyes turned to him. This was the moment he'd orchestrated, the pivot point in his carefully constructed plan. "I have no desire to disrupt Theo's life further," Harlan continued. "Children need stability. What I propose is this. We maintain the current custody arrangement, but with court-mandated supervision of Ms. Lafferty's parenting decisions regarding medical care and education." Judge Monroe considered this. "You're being remarkably generous, Mr. Mercer." "I'm thinking of my son," Harlan replied simply. What he didn't say was that this was merely the opening gambit, the sacrifice of a pawn to position his knights. The supervision would require weekly meetings, documentation, and scrutiny that would soon become a noose around Bethany's neck. "Additionally," Harlan added, "I request that Mr. Steiger have no involvement in decisions regarding Theo's well-being until such time as the court deems appropriate." Ryan surged to his feet. "This is bullshit. You can't. Mr. Steiger." Judge Monroe's voice cracked like a whip. "One more outburst, and I'll have you removed. You have no parental rights here." Bethany grabbed Ryan's arm, pulling him back to his seat. Her eyes never left Harlan's face, finally recognizing the trap closing around her. Judge Monroe made her ruling. Supervised custody for Bethany, weekly reports to the court, and restrictions on Ryan's involvement with Theo. As they left the chambers, Harlan paused beside Bethany. "You should have read the divorce agreement more carefully," he murmured, "particularly the clause about endangering Theo's health." "This isn't over," Bethany hissed. "On that," Harlan agreed, "we are in perfect alignment." Outside, Pascal waited in an unmarked car. "How did it go?" "Phase 1 complete," Harlan replied, watching as Bethany, Ryan, and Theo drove away. "Begin Phase 2. I want everything on Ryan's former employers at Westridge Pharmaceuticals. Board members, security protocols, internal investigations, all of it. And Bethany's great aunt. Arrange a visit. Tell her I'm handling a revision to her estate planning. Pro bono, of course." Pascal raised an eyebrow. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," Harlan corrected. "I'm playing their game. They just don't know the rules yet." Chapter 5. Aunt Theodora's Bequest. Riverdale Palliative Care Center sat on 15 manicured acres overlooking the Delaware River. Harlan navigated the hushed corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged there, nodding to staff as he passed. The bouquet of lilies in his hand completed the image of a dutiful family visitor. Room 317 was bathed in afternoon light when he entered. Theodora Lafferty lay propped against pillows, her once substantial frame now fragile beneath the blankets. Despite her illness, her eyes were sharp and assessing as they fixed on Harlan. "You're not from hospice," she stated flatly. Harlan placed the lilies on a side table. "No, Ms. Lafferty. I'm Harlan Mercer." Recognition flashed across her face. Bethany's ex-husband, the lawyer. She studied him for a moment. "You've got some nerve showing up here." "I've been told that before," Harlan replied, taking a seat beside her bed. "I understand you've been working with Brady and Winters on your estate plan." Theodora's eyes narrowed. "Bethany mentioned you were conniving. Seems she undersold it." "Bethany tells many stories," Harlan responded evenly. "Some truer than others." "Get to the point, Mr. Mercer." "I'm dying, not senile." Harlan appreciated her directness. "Your estate is substantial. Currently, It's structured to pass entirely to Bethany upon your death. She's my only living relative. Is she? Harlan removed a folder from his briefcase. Did you know that Bethany has been systematically endangering your great-great-nephew Theo's health by concealing his medical conditions? He placed documented evidence before her. The altered school records, affidavits from the school nurse, Judge Monroe's ruling. Theodora's hands trembled slightly as she examined the papers. Why would she do this? Control, Harlan replied simply, and to remove obstacles to her relationship with Ryan Steiger, who, incidentally, has a documented history of violence and connections to drug trafficking. He showed her Ryan's sealed criminal records, which Pascal had obtained through channels best left unexplained. Bethany told me you were abusive, Theodora said, watching his reaction carefully. Did she mention specific incidents? Theodora hesitated. No, just that you were controlling. Ask yourself, Ms. Lafferty, in the 15 years you've known me, have you ever seen evidence of that? Or is it possible Bethany is projecting her own behaviors onto me? Silence filled the room as Theodora absorbed his words. Finally, she sighed heavily. What do you want, Mr. Mercer? I'm not here for your money, Harlan assured her. I'm here because Theo deserves protection, including from his mother if necessary. And you expect me to disinherit my only niece based on your say-so? I expect nothing, Harlan replied. I'm merely providing information you deserve to have before finalizing your estate plans. He stood to leave, placing his card on her table. Whatever you decide, I wish you peace in the time you have left. As he reached the door, Theodora called out, Mr. Mercer. He turned. I've lived long enough to recognize genuine concern, she said quietly, and genuine manipulation. Sometimes they look remarkably similar. Harlan nodded. The difference is in the outcome, Ms. Lafferty. Who benefits from your decision and who suffers? 3 days later, Harlan received a call from Gerald Winters, Theodora's estate attorney. Mr. Mercer, Ms. Lafferty has requested your presence for the signing of her new will tomorrow at 2 p.m. She was quite insistent. When Harlan arrived the following day, he found not only Theodora and her attorney, but also Bethany, her face tight with barely contained fury. Welcome to our little gathering, Theodora greeted him, her voice stronger than during his previous visit. I made some changes I thought everyone should hear directly. Gerald Winters cleared his throat uncomfortably before reading the new provisions. 20% of the estate to Bethany outright, 30% to Theo in a trust managed by a neutral third-party trustee until he reached 25, and the remaining 50% to establish a foundation for children with severe allergies, with Harlan appointed to the board of directors. Bethany's composure shattered. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you. Yes, let's discuss what you've done, Theodora interrupted coldly. Like telling me Harlan couldn't be bothered to visit when I was hospitalized last year, when in fact you never told him I was ill. Or perhaps how you've been systematically overdosing my pain medication on the days before my cognitive assessments with Dr. Feldman. The room fell silent. Harlan hadn't known about this last detail. His respect for the elderly woman increased substantially. You're confused, Bethany tried, shooting a venomous glance at Harlan. He's manipulating you. The only person who's been manipulating anyone is you, Bethany, Theodora stated firmly. I may be dying, but I'm not a fool. Gerald has already documented my mental competence with 3 independent psychiatrists. The will stands. After the papers were signed, Harlan helped Theodora back to her room, leaving Bethany with the attorney. She'll contest it, Theodora said as he adjusted her pillows. She'll lose, Harlan replied confidently. Theodora studied him. You didn't tell me about the medication. I didn't know, but you're not surprised. No, Harlan admitted. I'm not. Theodora patted his hand weakly. You're a dangerous man, Harlan Mercer. I hope my great-nephew has inherited your spine rather than his mother's ethics. As Harlan left the facility, he spotted Bethany in the parking lot, speaking intensely with Ryan on her phone. When she saw Harlan, her expression transformed into pure hatred. Harlan merely nodded politely as he passed. Phase 2 was complete. The financial foundation of Bethany's future was crumbling, and with it, he suspected Ryan's interest in their relationship. Now it was time for Phase 3, dismantling Ryan Steiger himself. Chapter 6, The Westridge Gambit. Westridge Pharmaceuticals' headquarters dominated the Philadelphia skyline, its glass facade reflecting the setting sun as Harlan rode the elevator to the executive floor. The email from Carson Westridge, the company's CEO, had been unexpected but not unwelcome, a perfect piece falling into place. "Mr. Mercer," Carson greeted him, rising from behind an imposing desk. At 65, he remained imposingly fit, his handshake firm. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Your message sounded urgent," Harlan replied, taking the offered seat. Carson nodded gravely. 3 days ago, our security team detected an intrusion into our research database. Specifically, our newest cancer treatment protocols, a potential billion-dollar breakthrough. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I specialize in criminal defense, not corporate espionage." The breach originated from an IP address associated with Ryan Steiger, Carson stated flatly. "Our former security consultant." Harlan kept his expression neutral despite the surge of satisfaction. Pascal had done his job perfectly, leaving digital breadcrumbs that any competent security team would find, but nothing that could be traced back to the actual source. "That's quite a coincidence," Harlan remarked carefully. "Is it?" Carson slid a folder across the desk. "Our investigation uncovered communications between Steiger and Del Mar cartel affiliates dating back to his employment here. We believe he's selling our research. Have you contacted the authorities?" "Not yet." Carson leaned forward. "We understand Mr. Steiger is involved with your ex-wife." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "You've done your homework. So has your friend, Mr. Bennett. He reached out to us last week with concerns about industrial espionage. Very patriotic of him." The two men regarded each other with mutual understanding. No explicit acknowledgement of the choreographed nature of this encounter was necessary. "What exactly are you asking of me, Mr. Westridge?" "Your expertise in negotiating with the Justice Department," Carson replied smoothly. "If we report this directly, it becomes public. Stock prices plummet, investors panic. If, however, a respected attorney with federal connections helps facilitate a quiet investigation." Harlan nodded slowly. "I can make some calls. Arrange a meeting with the appropriate officials. Properly framed, this could be handled with discretion." "Excellent." Carson stood. "I've taken the liberty of preparing a retainer agreement." As Harlan signed the documents, Carson added casually, "Oh, and we've scheduled a board meeting for next Friday to discuss the situation. Your presence would be appreciated." "Friday?" Harlan echoed. "That's Theo's weekend with his mother." "Bring him along," Carson suggested. "My grandson is about his age. They could swim in the company pool while we meet." Harlan smiled thinly. "That's very thoughtful. I'll need to make arrangements with Bethany, of course." "Of course." Later that evening, Harlan called Bethany as required by the new court supervision order. "I need to switch weekends with Theo. I have an unavoidable meeting Friday." "Absolutely not," Bethany snapped. "You know we're taking Theo to Ryan's lake house that weekend. It's been planned for weeks." "I understand, but this is a significant client. Perhaps Ryan could." "Ryan has already taken time off work," Bethany interrupted. "The answer is no, Harlan." "I see," Harlan replied evenly. "In that case, I'll need to inform Judge Monroe about the change in plans. The supervision order requires disclosure of all overnight trips with Theo, particularly to remote locations." Silence stretched across the line. "Fine," Bethany finally hissed. "But you'll take him the following weekend instead." "Thank you for your flexibility," Harlan responded politely. "I'll pick him up Friday at noon." After ending the call, Harlan texted Pascal. "Lake house plans canceled. Proceed with installation." The reply came moments later, team already in place. Equipment ready. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. By Friday, Ryan would be meeting with federal agents about the data breach. By Saturday, the lake house would be ready for its purpose. And by Sunday, the final phase would begin. Harlan poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and raised the glass in a silent toast to the coming storm. Chapter 7. Federal Interest. Friday morning dawned with a thunderstorm that matched the mood inside Ryan Steiger's apartment. Bethany paced the living room while Ryan hurriedly packed a suitcase. "I don't understand why you have to go now," Bethany protested, following him into the bedroom. "We were supposed to leave for the lake house in 3 hours." Ryan stuffed shirts haphazardly into the bag. "I told you." Carson Westridge called personally. "Said there's been a security breach and they need me to consult on the investigation." "Why you? You haven't worked there in years." "Because I designed part of their security system," Ryan snapped. "Look, this could be a huge opportunity. If I help them identify the breach, they might bring me back with a promotion." Bethany's eyes narrowed. "And the fact that Harlan suddenly needed to switch weekends with Theo doesn't strike you as suspicious? The timing is just a coincidence." Ryan paused, doubt flickering across his face before he dismissed it. "Harlan doesn't even know about my history with Westridge. He's not that connected." "You underestimate him," Bethany warned. "He's been 2 steps ahead of us since the divorce." "Well, I can hardly refuse when the CEO calls personally, can I?" Ryan zipped his suitcase closed. "Besides, Westridge is talking about a $50,000 consulting fee. We need that money, especially after your aunt's little bombshell." Bethany fell silent at the reminder of Theodore's will. The loss of millions she'd counted on still stung deeply. "Fine," she conceded, "but I'm telling you, Harlan is behind this somehow." "You're paranoid," Ryan replied, checking his watch. "I've got to go. I'll call you tonight after the meeting." Ryan kissed her quickly before grabbing his bags. "Reschedule the lake house for next weekend. By then, we'll have the Westridge money to celebrate with." Across town, Harlan sat in Judge Monroe's chambers, reviewing modifications to the custody supervision order. "These provisions seem reasonable," Judge Monroe noted, scanning the document. "Expanded visitation during summer months, joint decision-making on education, and continued supervision of medical decisions." "Thank you, Your Honor," Harlan replied. "I believe this arrangement best serves Theo's interests while maintaining stability." Judge Monroe studied him over her reading glasses. "You know, Mr. Mercer, I've seen hundreds of custody disputes. Usually, the wronged spouse fights for every advantage. Revenge benefits no one, Your Honor," Harlan answered smoothly. "Least of all Theo." Judge Monroe's lips quirked slightly. "Very diplomatic. I'll sign the order today." As Harlan gathered his papers, the judge added, "By the way, a colleague mentioned seeing you at Westridge Pharmaceuticals yesterday. Expanding your practice areas?" "Just helping an old friend with a sensitive matter," Harlan replied casually. "Involving federal agents, from what I hear." Harlan met her gaze evenly. "Corporate espionage concerns. Nothing that would interest family court, unless it involved parties to a custody case," Judge Monroe remarked, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the air between them hummed with unspoken understanding. "Purely coincidental, I assure you," Harlan finally said. Judge Monroe nodded slowly. "Of course. Good day, Mr. Mercer." At noon, Harlan picked up Theo from Bethany's house. The boy seemed subdued, clutching his backpack tightly. "Looking forward to our weekend?" Harlan asked as they drove away. Theo shrugged. "Mom said you ruined our lake trip." "Did she?" Harlan kept his voice neutral. "I'm sorry about that, but I have something special planned instead. How would you like to swim a rooftop pool with a view of the whole city?" Theo's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And afterward, we can have dinner at that dinosaur restaurant you like." By the time they reached the Westridge building, Theo's excitement had overcome his initial reluctance. Carson Westridge greeted them warmly, introducing his grandson Brady before whisking Harlan away to the boardroom. Inside, 2 serious men in dark suits waited alongside Carson and several board members. "Mr. Mercer, these are Agents Delaney and Sawyer from the FBI Cyber Division," Carson explained. Harlan shook their hands. "I understand you're investigating a potential data breach." "Among other things," Agent Delaney replied grimly. "We've been tracking Del Mar cartel movements into pharmaceutical IP theft for months. Your client's situation fits a pattern." The meeting proceeded efficiently, with Harlan guiding the discussion toward a controlled investigation that would protect Westridge's stock value while gathering evidence. As they finalized the approach, Carson's assistant entered with an urgent message. Mr. Steiger has arrived downstairs, she announced. Carson glanced at Harlan. Perfect timing. Shall we proceed as discussed? Harlan nodded. Agents, if you could remain here momentarily, Mr. Westridge, and I will greet Mr. Steiger and bring him up. In the lobby, Ryan's expression morphed from confidence to confusion when he spotted Harlan beside Carson. What the hell is this? Ryan demanded, stopping short. Mr. Steiger. Carson greeted him coldly. Thank you for coming. Mr. Mercer has been advising us on a security matter that appears to involve you. Ryan's eyes darted between them. I don't understand. Perhaps we should continue this conversation upstairs, Harlan suggested smoothly. Federal agents are waiting. The color drained from Ryan's face. Federal? This is some kind of setup. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear, Carson stated. Fuck this, Ryan spat, backing away. I'm not falling for whatever game you're playing, Mercer. As Ryan turned to leave, 2 security guards blocked his path. Mr. Westridge would appreciate your cooperation, sir. Ryan's panicked gaze found Harlan, who simply adjusted his tie calmly. Running would be unwise, Ryan. It tends to imply guilt. Trapped, Ryan had no choice but to follow them to the elevator. As the doors closed, he hissed at Harlan. Bethany was right about you. No, Harlan replied quietly. She wasn't nearly right enough. Chapter 8. Lake House Revelations. The following weekend, Bethany drove alone to Ryan's lake house, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The past week had been a nightmare. Ryan was under investigation for corporate espionage, released on bail, but facing potential federal charges. His assets were frozen. The promised Westridge consulting fee had evaporated. And somehow, Harlan's fingerprints were all over it, though she couldn't prove anything. She needed time alone to think, to plan their next move. The lakefront property, Ryan's pride and joy, purchased with cash through an LLC to hide it from his previous divorce settlement, would provide the perfect refuge. As Bethany turned onto the private road leading to the house, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Ms. Lafferty? A woman's crisp voice came through the speakers. This is Nurse Wilkins from Riverdale Palliative. I'm afraid I have difficult news. Your Aunt Theodora passed away an hour ago. Bethany pulled over, a complex mixture of grief and calculation washing over her. I understand. Thank you for letting me know. Mr. Winters, her attorney, asked to be notified immediately. He mentioned there would be a reading of the will tomorrow. So soon, it was Ms. Lafferty's explicit instruction. The reading will be at 3 p.m. at Mr. Winters' office. After ending the call, Bethany sat motionless, processing this new development. 20% of Theodora's estate would still be a substantial sum, enough perhaps to cover Ryan's legal expenses. A grim smile crossed her face. Perhaps things were finally turning in their favor. She continued to the lake house, the familiar sight of the rustic cabin usually bringing comfort. Today, however, something felt off. The door was unlocked, though Ryan insisted he'd secured everything before his last visit. Inside, nothing appeared disturbed, yet Bethany couldn't shake the sensation of intrusion. She moved through the rooms cautiously, checking closets and windows. In the master bedroom, she noticed Ryan's laptop on the nightstand. Strange, since he'd taken it to Philadelphia. Curious, she opened it. The screen came to life without requesting a password, another anomaly. The desktop was empty except for a single folder labeled for Bethany. Her pulse quickening, she clicked it open. Inside was a video file. She pressed play. The footage showed the very room she was sitting in, but from weeks earlier. Ryan entered with a woman Bethany recognized as his administrative assistant. What followed was an intimate encounter that left no doubt about their relationship. The timestamp indicated this had occurred during a weekend Ryan had claimed to be fishing with friends, while Bethany was caring for Theodora. Bethany's hand flew to her mouth. As the video continued, the conversation afterward became even more damning. When are you going to leave her? The woman asked, curled against Ryan's side. Soon, Ryan promised. Once the old lady dies and Bethany gets her inheritance, then we're good to go. You really think she'll give you access to all that money? Ryan laughed. She already added me to her accounts. Besides, she's completely blindsided by the custody battle with her ex, hasn't got a clue I've been moving her money into the offshore account. Bethany paused the video, her hands shaking. She checked her banking app and found her savings account nearly depleted. Over $200,000 gone, transferred in small increments over the past 3 months. Frantically, she searched through the laptop, finding detailed records of Ryan's dealings, the offshore account information, dates and amounts of transfers from her accounts, even emails plotting how to access Theodora's estate once it passed to Bethany. As the magnitude of the betrayal crashed over her, another file caught her attention: Westridge evidence. Inside were documents clearly stolen from the pharmaceutical company, along with communications to potential buyers, information that would devastate Ryan's defense against the federal charges. Bethany's phone rang again, Ryan this time. "Hey," she answered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Where are you?" Ryan demanded. "At the lake house." "Where are you?" Listen carefully. Ryan's voice was tense. "Don't go inside. Just turn around and leave right now." "Too late," Bethany replied coldly. "I'm already looking at your laptop." Silence stretched across the line. "It's not what you think," Ryan finally said. "Really? Because it looks exactly like you've been sleeping with your assistant, stealing my money, and planning to leave me once you got your hands on Theodora's inheritance." "Bethany, save it," she cut him off. "I've seen everything. The videos, the transfers, the Westridge files. It's over, Ryan." "Listen to me." Ryan's voice took on a desperate edge. "That laptop wasn't supposed to be there. Someone planted it. Think about it. Who would benefit from turning us against each other right now?" Bethany froze. "Harlan." "Exactly. He's setting us both up. The laptop is probably being tracked right now. Federal agents could be on their way to the lake house as we speak." Bethany looked around frantically. "What do I do?" "Close the laptop. Don't touch anything else. Get out of there now." As Bethany moved to comply, her phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. "I've forwarded copies of all files to the FBI, Ms. Lafferty. You have approximately 20 minutes before they arrive. I suggest you use that time wisely." "Oh my God," Bethany whispered. "What?" Ryan demanded. She read him the message. "Fuck," Ryan exploded. "This is Harlan's doing. His military buddy Pascal. They're behind all of it. What do we do?" "Meet me at the bus station. Bring cash, whatever you can grab. We need to disappear for a while." "What about Theo?" Bethany asked, suddenly remembering her son. Ryan's voice hardened. "We don't have time for that now. It's survival mode. Theo's with Harlan this weekend anyway." The casual dismissal of her child struck Bethany like a physical blow. In that moment, everything clarified with terrible clarity. Harlan hadn't just orchestrated their downfall. He'd revealed their true characters in the process. "I have to go," she said quietly. "I'll see you at the bus station in an hour," Ryan replied. "No," Bethany said. "You won't." She ended the call and sent a text to the unknown number. "Tell Harlan I want to talk. On my terms." The reply came instantly. The coffee shop across from the courthouse. 30 minutes. Chapter 9. Final Judgment. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Bethany arrived. Harlan sat at a corner table, 2 cups steaming before him. He rose politely as she approached, gesturing to the chair across from him. "You look tired," he observed as she sat down. "Cut the bullshit," Bethany snapped. "I know what you did." Harlan sipped his coffee calmly. "Which part specifically?" "All of it. The custody hearing, Aunt Theodora's will, Ryan's federal investigation, the lake house setup. You've been orchestrating everything from the beginning." "Orchestrating?" Harlan raised an eyebrow. "An interesting choice of words. It implies I created something from nothing. You manipulated evidence. Planted that laptop. Did I plant Ryan's infidelity?" Harlan asked quietly. "Did I force him to steal from you? To conspire against a dying woman? To endanger our son's health by removing his allergy information?" Bethany flinched at the last accusation. "That was Ryan's idea. He said it would strengthen our case if we could show you were paranoid about Theo's health. And you agreed." "I made a mistake," Bethany admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "Several mistakes." Harlan studied her, his expression unreadable. "What do you want, Bethany?" "To make a deal. I have information the federal prosecutors will want. about Ryan's other activities, his real connection to Delmar. I can testify against him in exchange for immunity for myself. And she hesitated. Reconsideration of the custody arrangement. Harlan leaned back, regarding her coldly. You believe you deserve another chance with Theo? After everything you've done? I'm his mother, Bethany whispered. Being a mother is more than biology, Harlan replied. It's choices, priorities, sacrifices. I know that now. No, Harlan countered. You know you've lost. There's a difference. He placed a folder on the table between them. These are the terms. Non-negotiable. Bethany opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a complete custody modification, granting Harlan full legal and physical custody of Theo. She would have supervised visitation twice monthly. Additionally, she would forfeit all claims to marital assets in exchange for Harlan arranging a plea deal with federal prosecutors. This is fair, Harlan finished for her. Considerably more than fair, given the circumstances. Tears welled in Bethany's eyes. I'll never see my son. You'll see him when it serves his interests, not yours, Harlan corrected. And only when you've demonstrated genuine reform. And if I refuse? Harlan's expression hardened. Then I stop protecting you. The evidence of your involvement in Ryan's schemes goes to prosecutors. Your knowledge of his corporate espionage. The altered medical records. The text discussing how to alienate Theo from me. Everything. Bethany stared at him, finally understanding the depth of the trap he'd constructed. You never intended to forgive me, did you? This was always your plan. Forgiveness requires remorse, Harlan replied. You've shown none until you were caught. As for planning, I simply created opportunities for your true character to reveal itself. And Ryan? Mr. Steiger made his own choices. His bail was revoked this morning when he failed to appear for a scheduled check-in. Border Patrol has been notified. Bethany's shoulders slumped in defeat. Theo will hate me. That depends entirely on you, Harlan said, sliding a pen across the table. Children are remarkably resilient when surrounded by stability and truth. After a long moment, Bethany signed the documents. As she rose to leave, she asked quietly, was any of it real? What we had? Harlan gathered the signed papers methodically. That's the wrong question, Bethany. What's the right one? Whether it would have mattered to you if it was. Harlan stood. My attorney will contact you about the visitation schedule. The FBI expects your statement tomorrow morning. Outside the coffee shop, Pascal waited in his car. He rolled down the window as Harlan approached. All set. It's done, Harlan confirmed, sliding into the passenger seat. That was quite a game of chess you played, Pascal observed as they pulled away. Harlan gazed out the window at Bethany's diminishing figure. Chess implies equal opponents following established rules. And that's not what this was? No, Harlan replied quietly. This was justice.